Good morning, everyone. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and I hope you're well. Today is Friday. It's July 31st. We're getting ready for Shabbos Parshas Veschanan, and it's also known as Shabbos Nachamu, based on the Haftarah that's going to be read. I want to start by sharing with you a news item that I saw this week. It was really disturbing. The news item was as follows. There are many people that find themselves in this scenario during this pandemic, that their loved ones, it could be a parent. In this case, the news case I saw, it was someone's mother. She's in an assisted living, an old age home, and because of the pandemic, this facility is not letting any visitors in for any reason whatsoever. So for months, she hasn't been able to visit her mother, and she's out of state. So she called the facility and said, "I'm so concerned and speaking to my mother. She misses me greatly. If there's any way, if I come in and I make a trip, we could think of some way how I might be able to meet with her." And the facility says, okay, we would make this accommodation if you would come in from out of town. They figured out some way. I don't know if it was to meet outside. I don't know what it was. They figured out some way that they were comfortable. The physicians who oversee the care of all the clients in this facility, they would be comfortable with. And she met her mother. And unfortunately, after months of not having seen her mother, she noticed several signs that her mother was not receiving the care that she required in this facility. And to some degree or another, there was some neglect. She filed some claims with the facility. When they didn't respond to her claims, she took it up the chain with the state where this incident had occurred. And she was alerting people that this is something to be aware of, that these are extremely challenging times. Patients, clients may not be getting the care that they need. And without their family members coming to visit on a regular basis, they may be unaware of this. So really try to do whatever they can to advocate from afar for their loved one, for their parent. It was a very sad story. In the course of her story, though, while being interviewed, this daughter was saying, why did she feel so obliged to be looking after her mother and to be making such a ruckus about this? But she was saying, I have a debt of gratitude. I owe my mother so much. I owe her, because she spent in the course of my childhood an incredible amount of time, energy, resources to feed me, to educate me, to take care of me, to clothe me, to wash my clothes, to launder my clothing. All these things, she went down a list of all the things she was thankful to her mother for. And therefore she says, therefore I owe her, and therefore I'm going to advocate for her. And that was the news item that I saw this week. And again, it was very sad. Your heart goes out to it. You can't imagine how many people may be in a similar situation as this. But then I saw something on the Parsha this week, which really made me think about that, and I want to share that with you. So in the Parsha this week, it's Veschanan, we're going to have a second telling of the Aseres HaDibros. The first time the Aseres HaDibros, the 10 commandments, those 10 utterances, are mentioned, are recorded in the Torah, is in Parshas Yisro, in Sefer Shemos. And that's where we read about the giving of the luchos, the tablets at Har Sinai, and that's the original spot. This week in Parshas Veschanan, it's in Sefer Devarim, where much of Sefer Devarim is Moshe Rabbeinu, his last speech that he was giving to Bnei Yisrael before passing away. And he reviews with them everything they've been through together. So of course, one of the items he's going to recount is Ma'amad Har Sinai. When they all stood together at Sinai, they had this national revelation, and Hashem shared with them the Aseres HaDibros. What many of our commentators point out is that if you look closely and you compare the record of the Aseres HaDibros, there are a number of nuances, words, slight differences that are different in the second telling of the Aseres HaDibros this week in Parshas Veschanan than in Parshas Yisro, in the first time that they were recorded. And I've seen numerous Rishonim and Achronim, many of our commentaries will spend time on this. They'll analyze. They'll reading it with a critical eye, and they'll say, we spotted a difference. How do we account for this difference? And that's where Torah Shabbat Peh gets in. Our oral traditions tells how Chazal understood this, what's being emphasized with the slight nuance and the change. And you see a lot of that in the commentaries. This week, I saw something which I don't think I had ever noticed before. It's in two of the dibros, in two of the utterances, two of the commands that we find on the luchos. There are two differences that, again, I just don't think it ever registered before this year. The first one, and I'm saying this out of sequence, but according to the commentary you're going to see that I'm going to share with you, this is how he records it. The first one that he takes note is in Kabedas Avicha V'Asimecha. We are ordered, we are commanded by Hashem that we have to respect. We have to show an incredible amount of respect to our mothers and our fathers. Here in the Dibra it says, Kabedes avicha v'asimecha, kasher tzivcha Hashem elokecha, in accordance with the directive that Hashem, your Lord, has given you. That doesn't show up in the first one. In the first recording of Vaseres Dibros, it just says, Kabedes avicha v'asimecha, l'man yarichon yamecha, that your day should be prolonged. But it doesn't say that line of kasher tzivcha Hashem elokecha, just like Hashem gave you a directive to do. What's the difference? Why here in Veschanan are those words added, and they weren't added in Yisro? This is a question of the Meshech Chachma, the great Rav Meir Simcha Cohen of Dvinsk, who was one of the great leaders of Klal Yisrael in the early part of the 20th century, and this is one of his first questions in the Meshech Chachma on this parsha. Then he follows it up with a second question. He says, also, look at when it comes to Shabbos. You'll see the same thing. It says right before this, Shamoras Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. It says to observe and keep the Shabbos and to sanctify it. Kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha, just like Hashem your Lord, your God your Lord commanded you. The first time in the Luchas it doesn't say that. It says Zachor. That's one difference. It says Zachor, remember the Shabbos. And it says L'Kadsho, and to sanctify it. But it doesn't say those words, Kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha. So what's going on in Parshas Veschanan that Hashem adds in these two nuances in these directives, that both by Kabedes Avicha V'Asimecha, that when we're told to respect our parents, that Hashem adds that nuance of Kasher Tzivcha Hashem Lokecha, just like Hashem has ordered you. And also when it comes to Shabbos, he says Kasher Tzivcha Hashem Lokecha, just like Hashem has ordered you. Why? Why in Veschanan and not in Yisro? So these are the questions that are bothering the Meshech Chachma. And the Meshech Chachma has a beautiful answer. He says it's extremely necessary for Hashem to emphasize those 2 points here. And at this point in Klal Yisrael's history, and it was not necessary back in Parshas Yisro. Why? At this point in Klal Yisrael's history, they are at the end of their sojourn in the wilderness. They've just spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness, where Hashem took care of their every need. And the Meshech Chachma points out, there's a Gemara in the Yerushalmi. It's a passage in the Talmud Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud. And it says as follows. It says, Kibur aveim have a mitzvah kala. The directive to honor our parents is really such a simple mitzvah. It makes so much sense. It's like we're paying back a debt. Someone has loaned us money. It's obvious we have to pay them back. So to our parents, we have to pay them back. Why? So he says, Avor tirchasam umzanasam. They put in so much time, labor, taking care of us, in raising us. They expended so much money to feed us. So it makes sense that we have to take care of them. So the Meshech Chachma says, this is why now, in Parshas Veschanan, Hashem has to emphasize Kasher Tzivcha Hashem Lokecha. Because there could have been some Chacham using his Yiddish cup 40 years after the sojourn in the wilderness began, and says, 1 second, do I really have such a debt of gratitude to my parents? What was the big deal in raising me? Did they have to spend any money to feed me and to give me anything to drink? We had the man in the wilderness. It was deposited on their doorstep every day. It fell from heaven. We had the Be'er Miriam. We had that spring that provided. All our needs were met. And there were times in the wilderness that the slav came, not the one that people died from, but there were times that the slav, the quail, came in and fed everyone. There was no tircha. There was no hassle involved in that. And what about my clothes? They never had to wash my dirty diapers. There's midrashim that say the Anane Akiva, those clouds of glory that surround the Klal Yisrael, they almost acted as a dry cleaner. They cleaned everyone's clothes by brushing up against them. Everything was miraculously kept clean. What did my parents do for me? Where was the tircha? Where was the hassle? Where was the spending long hours washing my clothes and diapers? Where did they have to hassle going to work to bring home, to put bread and food on the table? Come on, everything was there. So someone might come up, someone might be a chacham and say, for me, Kabedes Avicha doesn't apply. So now Hashem says, after 40 years in the wilderness, I want to make sure nobody thinks that way. So here where he gives the directive, he says, Kabedes Avicha v'asimecha, kasher tzivcha Hashem elokecha. Because I said so. That's what I'm giving the direction. Don't think it's just because there's a debt of gratitude. Because even if someone doesn't have that debt of gratitude, their parents, for whatever reason, didn't have the tircha. Let's say they were born with a silver spoon, and it wasn't such a hassle to get to raise those kids and to feed them. So someone shouldn't think, I don't owe anything to them. No, we have an obligation. Hashem gave us, Kabedes Avicha v'asimecha, kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha. And we have to obey that command because Hashem gave it to us. And I shouldn't be a chacham to try to think of ways I could get out of it. And the Meshech Chachma says that's the same reason by Shabbos here. why it says Shemuras Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, that we have to observe the Shabbos and we have to sanctify it. Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, because I, Hashem, gave you that directive to do so. Why? So the Meshech Chachma quotes the Gemara, and again from the Yerushalmi. And the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud says, Lo nitnu Shabbosos ela lasok behem b'divrei Torah. You know why Hashem gave us Shabbos? He wanted to give us a reprieve from all of our earthly duties and to say, I've got time during the week where I can dedicate to studying Torah. The rest of the week, I may have been busy. There could have been deadlines at work. There were meetings, whatever it was. I was so busy and for tumult. But come Shabbos, all those other responsibilities are taken away. And now I need to find some time to engage in Torah study. That's what the Gemara in the Yerushalmi says. So Reb Meir Simcha, the Meshech Chachma, says, the Dora Midbar, were they so busy during the week? Were they out farming? Were they plowing their fields? Were they working long hours in the office? No. What were they doing all day? So the Gemara tells us, you know what they did all day? They were learning Torah. There's a famous medrash that says, Lo nitna Torah ela la'ochlei man. The Torah was given to those Jews who were eating the man because they didn't have all the responsibilities to take care of, all those worldly responsibilities, all the gashmias, all those material responsibilities. They were able to focus on purely spiritual pursuits, those whole 40 years in the wilderness. So someone could have been a chacham and says, you know what? You know who Shabbos is for? For those people who during the week are so busy with material pursuits. So Hashem told them, take off one day a week, that you have to make it ruchni, you have to make it spiritual, and you have to engage in Torah study. But for me, I found time during the week to engage in Torah study. So I don't need a Shabbos, that's not for me. Someone might use their Yiddish cup to come up with some kind of rationalization like that. So Hashem says no, specifically to this generation, Shemuras Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, because I commanded you to do so. Don't start coming up with rationalizations. Why, you might think Shabbos may not apply to me. So no, Hashem says Shabbos is for each and every Jew. Nobody opts out of Shabbos, regardless of the fact that they may have had a week that was full of Torah study and they were absolved from engaging in material pursuits. So that's what Rameir Simcha suggests, is that specifically here in Sefer Devarim, at this point in history, to Klal Yisrael, after 40 years in the wilderness, there could have been some people who came up with a rationalization why they think these two mitzvahs don't apply to them because of their unique state that they had in the wilderness. They really don't owe their parents much because they didn't expend much in the way of resources and tircha and hassle to raise them. They really don't have a need for Shabbos because they're able to engage in Torah during the week. Hashem says no. There's no opting out of mitzvahs, depending on whatever the rationalizations may be. There's no opting out. Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha. I commanded, it's my directive that all of Klal Yisrael is supposed to observe these mitzvahs. Stick to it, no matter what type of excuses, no matter what type of rationalizations there may be. Keep the Taryag mitzvahs. That's what the Meshech Chachma is suggesting. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful pshat. Number one, it makes light of something that, again, never caught my eye before. I hadn't noticed that this is a difference between the original set of the Aseres HaDibros and now, this point in these two directives of Kasher Tzivcha Hashem. That hadn't caught my attention before, but now it did, and he has a beautiful explanation for why Hashem feels the need to emphasize it now, whereas he didn't feel the need in Parshas Yisro. They had just left Egypt. They weren't yet engaged. They didn't have this whole experience of eating mun for 40 years and having the be'er, that well of Miriam for 40 years, and just being able to engage in spiritual pursuits during the week and not material ones. This is all new to them. Then no one would have come up with those rationalizations then. But now, after 40 years in the midbar, it was very possible that someone could have. So now Hashem had to emphasize this. I think this is also very nice for another reason. This Shabbos, as we said, it's Parshas Nachamu, but it's also known as, it's Parshas V'eschanan, but it's also known as Shabbos Nachamu, based on the Haftorah, is that the Navi tells us, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, that he tells us that we can find comfort, that despite all of the warnings of Yeshayahu and the doom and gloom that he told us was going to come our way if we did not live up to Hashem's directives, he also told us that there will come a point of Nachamu, there will come a point of comfort, where Hashem will embrace us and comfort us when we do what we're supposed to do, when we live up to our obligations as Jews, as a nation, not just as individuals, but as a nation. And we return to Hashem, and then we're going to read about that, V'shavta al Hashem, we're going to read about that in the laning this week as well. We read about it on Tisha B'Av morning. We're going to read about it again. That was from V'eschanan. We're going to read it this Shabbos. And we're guaranteed by Yeshayahu Hanavi that if we take those steps, if we return to Hashem, if we recommit ourselves to live a life of Torah and mitzvahs and commit ourselves, then we're not going to come up with excuses. We're not going to come up with rationalizations, how we can opt out and think why mitzvahs don't apply to us. We're going to say, Taryag, mitzvahs apply to me. I'm a Jew, and this is my responsibility, and I'm going to observe them no matter what kind of ideas I might come up with, why they may not apply to me. I'm not going to use those rationalizations. I'm not going to exit. I'm going to keep myself committed to the Torah and mitzvahs. If we take those steps, then we can rest assured that what Yeshayahu Hanavi told us, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, that my nation, Hashem will say, I am here to comfort you. I think it's our heartfelt tefillah, it's our sincere prayer. All of us have been asking for comfort throughout these last number of months because of this pandemic, because of so many of the tsaros, because of so many of the challenges and problems that we're facing as a people and as a world. And we're looking for ways that are asking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to step in and to relieve us, to comfort us and take us out of this point. So Shabbos Nachamu provides us with that reassurance that if we recommit ourselves to observe the Torah and live a life of Torah and mitzvahs, we can look forward to a fulfillment of that nevuah, of that prophecy of Yeshayahu, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, my nation, my people, take comfort. Hashem will comfort us if we do what's necessary to live up to our end of the covenant that we've entered into with him. May we all merit seeing that comfort, that true nechama that only Hashem could provide us with as soon as possible. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.